Hello and welcome to the garden. So it's getting to the time when I want to set out some shallots and garlic to overwinter, and I'm going to start with this bed behind me. So much earlier in the year this had beetroot in one half, and then a little bit later it's had some carrots and parsnips. Well, actually the parsnips were a rather late afterthought because I had sown Hamburg parsley in here. Germination was completely rubbish, so I put in a late sowing of parsnips, and I think I need to clear this whole bed because I'm pretty sure that I've got enough shallots, garlic and possibly a few onion sets as well to put in here to fill this bed. Now, in previous years I had a 6-year rotation running here, and that was actually a lot better because these beds here, they've had roots in, and now they're going to get alliums, and actually the alliums need a much better soil than the roots. For the root crops, the carrots and the parsnips in particular, doesn't want to be too rich. You want those tap roots to have to dig down deep in order to find the goodies they're looking for. So this soil at the moment, I think it's pretty poor for the onions, so I need to clear all of the crops that are still in this bed and get some horse compost in there. Usually I'll just leave that on the surface, let the worms take it down and let nature take its course, but I think this time, because I need to get this bed ready to go pretty soon, I might just fork that into the top few inches of the soil and prepare this ready for planting up. The second of these beds here, that's got our main crop, carrots and parsnips, and we'll be working our way through those from late autumn into winter. I probably won't plant that up until the spring with my seed sown onions, so that one can wait for a while, but this one I think I need to get ready now. Now, it has been covered with mesh. That was to keep the carrot root fly away. I think I will keep that mesh nearby and cover this bed again after I put the shallots and garlic in, because those pesky birds do like to come along and give those a little tug as the new shoots emerge. So the first job is to uncover this, harvest what's there and start clearing this bed. We've been working our way through this beetroot for quite a while now. They're a little bit old, but they're still perfectly fine. They're very tasty roots, actually. I think we've already picked the best of these, but there's a few meals left in here. We've got a couple of new patches of beetroot that are coming on. With a bit of luck, we should get some decent roots from those just in time for winter, which is ideal. And I think next year I might plant even more beetroot because we do love the beetroot. It's quite a versatile veg. Some silly little ones in here. These aren't bad. So these roots were sown in clumps, and there's always one or two runty little fellows amongst those, and well, some of those can be very tasty roots too. I will probably take most of these. These others are of a slightly better size, and there's one or two in here that are rather bigger than is ideal. That, I think, is a fairly handy size for a beetroot. This well, they tend to get a little bit woody sometimes at this size. But I shall cook that and see what it's like. It's probably okay. It's not too bad. Oh, these were a late sowing of parsnip, but gee, that's not a bad root at all. We have had a few of these, and of course they will be better after they've had a good frost, but I don't want to leave them in here until the frost, so I'm harvesting the few that are in this part right now. The main crop in the other bed can go on for some weeks and they can enjoy the frost when it comes, and they should be sweeter and better roots then. But for now, those aren't too shabby, especially from this late sowing. Well, you can see here, this row of carrots have gone a little bit nuts. These are only chantenay, so they shouldn't be. Ordinarily, you take them when they're fairly small. That's most common, but they will actually form a really large carrot, and they're still great at that size. Nothing wrong with these at all. But you can see from the spacings here that I had intended these to be harvested while they were still young. But the garden has been so productive this year that we didn't really get round to many of these. We only took a few of them when they were small. And so quite a few of these have taken the opportunity to develop into rather large specimens. That is quite a mighty carrot for a chantenay. And the chantenay is interesting because you'd be most likely to see it. Have I got a small specimen? I might have a small one here. That sort of size, and they're commonly available in the supermarkets when they're small, and they are very nice when they're small, but actually it can serve pretty well as both an early carrot and a main crop carrot, and it will regularly produce good quality roots of quite monstrous proportions. Well, these have definitely been in here a lot longer than expected, but I think they're perfectly sound still. There's very little damage on them, very little sign of slug damage at least, which is good. And the mesh has kept the carrot root fly away. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with these, and we'll use these up first and we'll get to our main crop carrots a little bit later in the year. Now that's not a bad little harvest, and if I want these to keep for quite some time, then I would be crating these up in some just damp sand, or you can use an old potting soil. I think the sand is probably a little bit better, but just damp, you can pack those in, and that little bit of moisture will stop these from dehydrating, and they will keep quite happily in a cool but frost-free place like a shed or a garage. They will keep for quite some time in perfect condition. I'm not sure whether I'm going to do that with these. I will probably just bag these up, refrigerate them and use them over the next couple of weeks, but even in there they're going to keep for quite a long time. The danger there is that the refrigerator is rather dry, so that tends to dehydrate the roots, but I think I will be done with these before that is a problem. Another option would be to make a clamp outdoors. You can do that for potatoes, and most of the root crops I think store pretty well in a clamp. So that's where you make a mound of the veg, cover it with straw and then cap it with soil, put a little chimney in so that it can be so it can breathe, And yeah, but that's a lot of faff, and I can't really be bothered with that. So yeah, I think it would either be a crate if I wanted to keep them longer, or because I'm going to use these fairly soon, I'm just going to pop them in the fridge. The main crop, carrots and parsnips, provided we don't get a really big freeze, and we don't usually get too bad a freeze down in the south. Last winter was horrible at times, but that was a little bit unusual. Provided we don't get a big freeze, we can usually just leave those in the ground and dig them as necessary. If you start to see a bit of slug damage, then it's worth perhaps lifting them and crating those, but normally it's okay for us to leave them in the ground here. So having got all of the crops out of this bed, it needs a really thorough weeding. Onions really hate any competition with weeds, so I'm going to be quite thorough with that, and then I can get on with the preparation for the new sowing. The squirrels have been busy. I've found young oak saplings all over the garden, and they very often have a nice long taproot. Yeah, there it goes. You can't leave those for very long before they get quite well established. So I've got rid of most of the weed in this bed now, and I've just given it a quick rake over just to level it off a little bit. The soil actually doesn't look as bad in there as I thought, particularly up this end. I don't know why these two ends would be different, but that far end, the soil looked and felt much nicer than up this end. I have no idea why that would be, but anyway, now it's time to get some horse compost on there. Yeah. So this stuff is actually pretty nice. It's fairly well rotted. There's no smell to this at all. And if you're going to spread manure of some sort, that's what you're looking for. No big clumps of fresh manure. It shouldn't be stinky. It should be this dark, rich, lovely stuff. So this is produced locally. We get it bagged, and actually it's at least as cheap as bulk delivery. So this is what runs our garden. Now I know there can be risks with horse compost and with other manures from aminopyrrolid, but thankfully we've never had any problem with this supplier, so hopefully this is all good. We did test some of it last year. You can test it by growing particularly things like beans, and peas will show problems, as will tomatoes quite readily. So we did test it to see how the stuff was growing, and there were no problems. You can see it from twisted and stunted growth if there are any herbicide problems with it, but we've never had a problem with this stuff so far, and we've been using this for many years now, so hopefully hopefully this will be perfectly all right. A few lumpy bits that need to be broken up, but yeah, this is good rich stuff, and that is going to feed the soil very nicely. There's some sign of mycorrhiza there. That's always nice to see. It's always good to have some of that fungal activity in the soil. And of course this will be a little bit strawy, and I think there's definitely some woody stuff in here as well, and all of that actually is quite good for the soil because it brings that fungal component. So there's some woody stuff in there, and I would never think about sieving that sort of stuff out. I don't need the surface of the soil to have such a fine texture, so this is perfectly fine to spread over here at the moment. So I spread there a layer of a few inches thick, 2 or 3 inches probably, and that's plenty now to feed that soil. Our soil here is pretty sandy. There is some silt, but it's predominantly a sandy loam, and in order to have a good texture there for growing in, we've got to add plenty of bulky organic matter. It's no good spreading a wafer thin layer of some wishy-washy compost. Homemade compost, or then something like horse compost or farmyard manure, something like that, good bulky organic matter, well rotted. That's what's needed on this soil in order to maintain a decent texture, good moisture retention, and of course all of that organic matter is going to feed the soil life, and that's where the fertility comes from, and that's what I'm looking for on this plot. Now what I might do when I come to just work that in, because I don't want to plant directly into that horse compost, that would probably be the wrong thing to do. I want to just fork that into the top 4 or 5 inches. No, I'm not going to dig this soil, I'm not going to turn it over, but just mix that horse compost into the top few inches of soil. That will be better, I think, to then plant the shallots and garlic in. And then I might also give that a sprinkling of fish blood and bone. I use a reasonable amount of fish blood and bone. It's a fairly good general purpose fertilizer. It's slow release, but mostly I rely on the compost and manures, because that's what really helps the soil structure and the soil life. So I only had time yesterday to spread the layer of horse compost. Today I'm just going to fork that into the top few inches, then spread some fish blood and bone, and then give it another raking, ready for planting up. So all I'm doing here is just mixing the horse compost with the top few inches of the soil. I'm not trying to dig this over or anything. I just don't want to plant directly into the compost. well, that job's finished now and that is ready for planting up. So I'm going to get some garlic and shallots in there, possibly also some onion sets. In a couple of days time, I'll just leave that for the soil to settle for a couple of days, but that's good to go. It's a little bit annoying that I have to go to this much trouble for this bed, because in a 6-year rotation that I was running before, there would be crops destined for this bed that wouldn't go in until the spring. So I'd just be able to spread this with compost and just leave it, let nature take its course in the true no-dig fashion, and that's ideal. But since I've changed the garden around, I don't have that opportunity anymore. There's not a lot of room for maneuver in a 4-year rotation, because you've got the classic 3 years where you've got legumes followed by the brassicas followed by the roots, and that doesn't leave a lot of scope for fiddling around. So the only other thing that I'm rotating here at the moment are the onions, so they have to go in after the roots, and that's not ideal timing wise, and in terms of soil condition. It would have been much nicer if I'd had another crop going in here in the spring instead, but well, it is what it is. I've changed the garden around and that's what I'm left with. So anyway, the job is now done, all the prep is done, and I can sow away in a couple of days time. But that is it for this video. I will return later when I plant this up. So thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.